Hello everybody. What I want to do in this video is I want to show you how to set up your driver configuration on your Vex IQ Generation 2 and your controller. So I've already got my controller and my brain turned on, and the controller and the brain are already paired. I know that they're already paired because I can see the lights blinking on both the controller and, on the brain and on the controller. Setting up the driver configuration is something that tends to confuse students. And you go to drive your robot around and you enter, forward controls to drive it forward. It goes backwards or it turns, or you can't figure out what the controls are. And you do all that through the drive setup. So what I'm going to do, I've got it turned on. I'm going to hit X a few times just to make sure that I'm at the home menu. And right up here in the upper left, it says home. And what I want to do is, if I'm not already on it, I want to scroll left and right until I get to the drive menu. The drive menu is the menu item that's furthest to the left on the brain. So once I've got it highlighted, I'm going to press the check mark. So now that brings me to the drive menu. What I want to do, let me scroll left and right. I want to go over the different menu options real quick and what they do. So right here, the run menu option allows you to run your robot in remote control mode for an indefinite period of time. In other words, there's not a time limit set on it. You can keep driving it till either A, you stop it, it runs out of batteries, it crashes, whatever it might be, but there's no time limit. Scrolling to the right, I can see the next option is to run for 2 minutes. The next two options, actually the run for 2 minutes and the run for 1 minute option, will allow you to control your robot with your controller for either 2 minutes or for 1 minute. Those options are usually used in competition, where you have a set amount of time to control your robot to perform some tasks or some goals. Next is the controls, and this is where we're going to be spending most of our time. That's where we set up and configure our driver controls on our controller, and it's the part that tends to be the most confusing. Over here, this will give you a little bit of information. So if you click the check mark on information, it's just going to tell you a little bit about your robot. It says we've got a drive program for a standard robot, 2 or 4 motor drivetrain, 4 auxiliary motors, etc. It basically just gives you a little bit of information about the setup on your robot. Over here, sensor demo. If you have sensors plugged in, it's going to show the values on those different sensors. I don't have any real external sensors plugged in on this one. So now let's talk about setting up the driver controls. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the left and right buttons, and I'm going to scroll over to the part that says controls. I'm going to click the check mark. So this is where we can set up our controls. The first one I'm going to talk about is the joystick configuration. So on mine, you can see I've got it set for tank drive down here at the bottom. Yours might not be set for tank drive. You can switch it by clicking the check mark until you get to tank drive. But here's the most important thing that you need to know, and it's the thing that I see students messing up the most. If you take a look, and let me see if I can possibly scroll in a little bit. Yeah, if you take a look, you can see that there are 4 motor ports here, and 2 of them are in green. So 1 and 6. And down here we have 7 and 12. What this means is that you must, let me say that again, you must have your drive motors, your left motor, which I have right here, and my right motor, which I have over here, must, once again, must be plugged into 1 and 6 or 7 and 12. And so the most common thing I see is students that don't follow directions properly, and they plug their motors into different ports, and then it doesn't work, it won't drive around. Now the green ports, you'll notice I've got what is that, 1 and 6, the green ones signify which ports you are currently plugged in. And you'll see I've got a motor wire plugged right here in number 1. That's my left motor, which is right here. And then right over here, I have a motor wire plugged into 6, and that's my right motor right there. All right, now let's talk about further how to read it. You're going to notice on the tank drive, it shows, I don't know if you can see it on this video, it shows the left stick, that's what the circles represent, the left stick and the right stick, see if you can see this over here, the left stick and the right stick. That's what these two circles represent. So in tank drive mode, what this means is the left stick goes forward and backwards and controls the left motor. And the right stick, it's got an arrow, a blue arrow pointed up and a blue arrow pointed down. That controls the right motor. So what that means, let me zoom out. To drive this around, okay, I'm going to use both sticks. The left stick controls my left motor. Oh, I got to press. Let me go back to actual run. Okay, so now in tank drive mode, the way I've got it configured, the left stick is going to control my left motor, causes it to go forward and backwards, and my right stick controls my right motor, causing it to go forward and backwards. And then I can drive around. If I wanted to go straight, I would push both the left and the right forward. If I want to go backwards, that way, to do a sharp turn, I can push one forward and one backwards, etc. In most competitions, that's one of the single most common configurations is tank drive. It gives you a tremendous amount of control, but I'm going to warn you, it takes a lot of practice, And on this, the further you push, the faster you go. So if I want to go slow, just real small. If I want to go fast, I can go down further, etc. All right, now let me go back to that menu item. So once again, I'm going to scroll over to controls. And so once again, you can see it tells me I'm in tank mode. Now, another really common thing that happens is the controls are reversed. When you press forward, you go backwards. When you press backwards, you go forwards. So that's really easy to fix. Right here in the controls menu, what you want to do is you want to scroll all the way over. And here we go. So this right here, you see, says normal, and it shows going backwards and forwards, okay? Backwards and forwards. If for some reason, when you press forward, you go backwards, you press backwards and you go forwards, you need to reverse this, okay? So to reverse it, all you do is press the check mark. So now, let's go back and let's drive this thing around and see what happens. So I've reversed my controls. Now, when I press forward, let me zoom out. So now when I press forward, it should go backwards. And sure enough, that's exactly what happens. When I go backwards, it should go forward. So if that happens to one of your students, and they're complaining that when they go forward, it goes backwards, just go over here. Go over here to controls. Press check mark. Scroll over here. And once again, this has a forward and backward arrow. And just switch it. If it was on normal, go to reverse. If it was on reverse, go to normal. Now then, the one right next to it does exactly the same thing, but it's for turning. So if you try to turn left and you go right, and you try to turn right and you go left, same thing, just reverse what's on here. So if you're on normal and it's not working correctly, your turns are reversed, just switch it to reverse. Or the opposite, if it's on reverse, switch it to normal. All right, now let's go back to the different modes. So tank drive we're now familiar with. Let me zoom in just a little bit. All right, so we're now familiar with tank drive. If I want to switch to a different type of drive, I just press the check mark. So now we're in split arcade mode. Once again, it tells me I've got to be plugged into either 1 and 6, or 7 and 12. The green tells me that I am currently plugged into 1 and 6. What this does is the left stick, you'll see, has a left and right blue arrow. That means that controls my left and right. I can turn left and right with the left stick. And the right stick has a blue arrow pointing up and pointing down. So that controls my forward and backwards. Let's take a look at that. I'm not going to demonstrate every mode. I'll demonstrate a couple. Okay, so the right stick should control my going forward and backwards. Let me zoom out. Forward, backwards. And you notice that stick doesn't do anything left and right. So I want to turn, I use my left stick, just as it showed me in the setup. All right, let's go and take a look once again at a few other modes. So I'm going to come over here to controls and click there. And once again, the exact same thing. If your left stick, you tell it to turn left, and instead you go right, or on your forward and backwards, if they're reversed, same thing. Just come all the way down to the end and do the opposite of whatever you have set up here, okay, on the forward and backwards and on the turning. Okay, so that's Split Arcade 1. You can come over here to Split Arcade 2. Split Arcade 2 is exactly the same mode. What it tells you now is that your left stick controls your forward and backwards, and your right stick, and once again, you can see it's got the two little blue arrows, one pointed left, one pointed right. That's going to control your turning. Right Arcade. What this does is it puts all your controls on one stick. So this shows you that right here, the right stick controls going forward, controls going backwards, controls going left, and it controls going right. Once again, I'll demonstrate that mode. Oh, oops. Right Arcade. Okay. So let me run. So now, one stick. You notice my left stick doesn't do anything. My right stick controls everything. All right. The students are generally very comfortable with the arcade modes. Right Arcade and Left Arcade. Left Arcade is exactly the same thing as Right Arcade. The only difference is that you use the left stick. All right, now I'm back to Tank Drive. So now let's talk about what these other things mean. Okay, so this controls, the very first thing controls your, basically your drive setup. The rest of them control the other motors and actuators that you might have hooked up to your robot. So let me go to the right. And the first one right here, it shows a 10. That means anything that you have plugged into port number 10 right here will be controlled with the left shoulder buttons, these buttons right here. Now, this is in white, so it tells you I don't have anything hooked up there. Okay, I don't have anything hooked up there. And the same thing, if things seem reversed, in other words, let's say you've got a claw hooked up, okay? And with that claw, you want to press it in order to, go one way and then press the other button to go the other way, and that's reversed. All you got to do is click the check mark, and that'll reverse for you. In other words, it'll cause the motors to spin in the opposite direction. I'll show you on this next one. So now I'm going to come over here, and what this shows, the one that's highlighted, this is for motor port number 4. And you'll notice I do have something plugged into motor port number 4. I have a little claw. And so that wire goes from port 4 to here. And I know I've got something plugged into it because it's green. So what this is telling me is that my right shoulder buttons, these two right here, are going to control that motor. Let's go take a look at that. So once again, I've got to exit out of there and come over here to run. Now let's give that a try. Watch the claw. I'm going to press the up button, and it closes. I'm going to press the lower one, and it goes the other direction. So top button closes, bottom button opens. Top button closes, bottom button opens. Now, if that's not what I was wanting, if I wanted the opposite, let me go back to controls, and let me reverse that. So it's right there. I've got motor port 4 highlighted. I'm going to press the check mark to go to reverse. Now, let's go back to run. So now, the bottom button closes and the top button opens. Bottom button closes, top button opens. All right, let's go back and let's just take a look. The rest of it's pretty simple. You should be able to read it on your own now. The next one controls the E button, and the E button's right here. These two buttons right here. And what it's telling you, the E button is hooked up to port number 11. Once again, I don't have anything plugged in there. But those two buttons would control whatever motor is in port number 11. And then you got the F buttons, which are these two buttons right here. And same thing, port number 5 is the port that's hooked up to the F buttons. And then once again, you've got your forward, reverse, left and right. So once again, it's pretty simple once you begin to work with it. The single most important thing to remember is your drive motors must be plugged in to either port 1 and 4 for your left and right motors, or ports number 7 and 10. If they're not, it's not going to work no matter what you do, trying to drive from the stick and no programming. And the green tells you which motors you are currently plugged into, or if you have anything plugged into 1 and 4, or excuse me, 1 and 6 and 7 and 12. It just takes a little bit of time to work with it and experiment with it, but it's actually pretty self-explanatory once you get into it. If you got any questions, just stick them in the comment section down below. Thanks a lot.